Pressure is a privilege, but pressure is perceived. And sometimes it's conscious and sometimes it's unconscious. Sometimes we're not aware. Well, we're aware that it's there, but like, why is it there? Did we choose it? Did it come from our upbringing? Is it a pattern that we have? That's, I think, something we can also dive into.
So we can agree that pressure is on everyone, whether it's professionally or personally. We all deal with it at some point. And Alex, you and I were taking a dive into a couple of characters I think some of you may know if you're kind of followers of this content, but Jesse Itzler and David Goggins, two very polarizing, interesting characters and people really, but the character really kind of comes out in terms of how they've managed their life, where they came from, the pressures that they face specifically, which there's some consistencies there and some that are completely opposed in terms of their circumstances. But I want to then be able to tie this into how pressure can make or break you in real estate. So what do you think?
I think it's an amazing subject. And I wanted to maybe, and it was something we can continue to unpack, like pressure is a privilege, but pressure is perceived. And sometimes it's conscious and sometimes it's unconscious. Sometimes we're not aware. Well, we're aware that it's there, but like, why is it there? Did we choose it? Did it come from our upbringing? Is it a pattern that we have? That's, I think, something we can also dive into.
Yeah. I mean, is it even negative? Does it require a negative context?
Well, that goes back to the pressure. Jesse's point is pressure is privilege. And I think that Goggins would say that too.
Yeah. And I think Goggins would probably say it more in hindsight, right? And I think maybe Jesse dove into it a little bit earlier. But let's, for those of you that are watching that maybe are not as familiar with Jesse or David, can you give us a quick overview of who these two people are?
I don't know as much about Jesse. I've listened to a lot of his stuff, like where his like upbringing kind of came from and stuff like that. The two of them, the nexus of them is that Jesse wrote the book Living with a Seal. So that's where the two of them kind of came together. But, that obviously was after David Goggins became Goggins. So I know more, and as I think we talked a lot about Jesse and NetJets and his like really cool story there about this is kind of like he put pressure on himself of saying, we're going to do this thing, and he had no idea how to do it. And, like that cool story we were talking about where he's like, man, how do I get in front of these people? How do I get in front of these people that would actually buy small packages or like timeshare of a jet, for just lack of a better like terminology of it. And we were talking about the other day, we were laughing how cool it was. Like he found out where this like high net worth conference was happening. And he went to it was like a bagel shop or something, or a bakery or something. And it was right next door to the conference room place. And he bought all of the muffins that were in the bakery. And so then people like went in to get a coffee and a muffin, and all the muffins were bought out. And so like then he was outside like, hey, I got muffins for sale. And so it was just able for him to meet these people. And like that was, that I'm sure he did a lot more than that, but like that was just such a gutsy move. He didn't have much money, so he put that like pressure on himself of like, how do I get in front of these people? I don't know how it's going to work, but I'm going to figure it out. And then went and was very creative about how he got in front of these high net worth people. Did you have anything you kind of want to add to Itzler's story?
Yeah, I mean, and that's how I see the difference or at least one of the differences is in Jesse's story, and maybe whoever's watching, maybe in your story, there is this understanding that pressure has value, being under the gun has value, and that you put yourself there because you do perform well or you have this do or die mentality. And that's what Jesse did. And I've done that too. And the earliest instances I can remember of doing that, although in the moment I didn't know I was doing it, was I was terrible at getting work done at school, my schoolwork. Really, as far back as I can remember, all the way into college. of doing things ahead of time. I was always a procrastinator. But for whatever reason, although I saw that as a negative, I always did my best work and I always got an excellent grade. But in the moment, it was not very comfortable. That pressure was not very comfortable. And leading up to it, it was dreadful. I mean, I was like, ugh, I'm running out of time. It's Tuesday. This is due on Thursday. Tomorrow's my last day to write 84 pages or whatever it is. And I've got to get it done. And I always got it done. And then I started to be like, well, why do I do that? Like, I really have never gotten to an answer as to why exactly I do that. All I know is that I got into the mode of doing it and it became my habit. And it was a habit that has worked for me. Do I think that's optimal? I don't know. It's been optimal for me only because it's worked. Now, as you start building businesses and, getting into real estate and you start to open up different opportunities and you're running different businesses at the same time, then I think either you're going to zero in on one opportunity and do that exceptionally well, or you're still able to, do things last minute. Although it's not something that I like to do. Does that align with anything or any of your behaviors or how you handle things, or are you a super planner when it comes to that?
Definitely not a super planner. But I did want to say, if you want to find out, get to the root of that, come and take ayahuasca with me because you probably helped to figure that out.
I'm sure
As a
that's the
side.
case. I'm sure that's the case.
Well, it's like, where does it come from? Like, it's a curiosity thing. And if you're cool with it and you still do it and you're cool with it, and hey, there's plenty of people that works for, myself included to a certain degree. I did want to also kind of just say to anybody out there who's like, well, what about the people in war-torn countries and that are struggling, and is that pressure a privilege? Let's not take this too literal. Like everything we say here, I think maybe we're talking about the first world. I mean, you could get very existential about it and say, hey, being a human is a privilege, even if you are struggling. And I know that's a tough subject to go down that road, but let's stay with this one. No, to answer your question, I was that kid. Yep. And then that did resonate out through how we do one thing is how we do everything. I did that. I would put myself in credit card debt. You know, I did a post last night, bro. I don't know if you saw it. Your wife actually liked it. I was going through old photos, pulled out my storage unit. Pressure. This has been in the back of my head, like cleaning out this storage unit. Procrastinate for years, bro. Years. And I went in there this weekend. And I was like, I am going down there on Sunday. I don't care what, Alex, you are not going to figure out a way to get out of doing this. And I went down, bro. And, I pulled stuff out. I did a couple loads in my Tesla. And, and then I was like, okay, how do you eat an elephant? I think it's kind of, I get this from Candace. And this, it's a thing people said, how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time. It's like, okay. And I have that on my daily tracker, one big task a day. So a big task for me is like, I do my whole day, like, the calls, the YouTube, the team, all this stuff. And then it's like at the end of the day, when I'm tired, I'm like, I'm going to clean out one tote, just one tote. So I don't have to like do this whole big thing. It's like, and then I'm like, okay, just focus, dude. All you got to do is get through this one tote. We're doing a big yard sale. It's like going to a yard sale. It's junk. And it just feels good, dude. I had like 3 bags of garbage. Literally, I had garbage in my storage unit, old cardboard, shit like that. And it felt good to get it out. So I guess that's a little bit of pressure at the end of the day, I guess, when you're tired or when I'm tired. So, yeah, I have, and I'm trying to get better at, I am getting better at like not waiting till the last minute, because there isn't any last minute for the storage unit. Obviously, it's been years. It's not anything like you have to do this. I got the money to pay for the storage unit. There's no have to. So, but it's like, it sits in the back of my head, bro. Like takes up a little bit of space of like, oh, that storage unit.
Yeah, that's where I am too. It's those little, that's it exactly. It's those little things that just kind of peck at you in the back of your head that aren't heavily like destroying your day or your mindset or anything like that. But it's just like, it just doesn't feel optimal. And I think also this is coinciding with age too, for at least for me, it does. It's like, even conversations with my wife in terms of, how much stuff do we want, or do we really need to buy that? Or you know, you start to see the tail end of life and it's like, will I spend my time doing that thing? Or, thinking about a boat. Should I be buying a boat, or should I just buying a membership for a boat? Because I want to get back into boating. It's like, nah, which one makes more sense? What, and this is just stupid little things, right? Like I even think about the garage. I'm like, what other cars do I want to have in the garage? And it's like, damn, will I really spend the time? You know how you are, Eddie, about keeping your cars nice. Will you have enough time to keep them all nice the way you like to keep them nice? And then what about the other things you want to do? So it's just even that really kind of silly, again, first world problems, right? That's what that is. But I mean, it's just this reconciliation with, what do you want to go through, and what do you want to be responsible for, and do you want it to be bothering you and weighing on you because of the way you treat it and the way you think about it. Uh, it's but I want to bring this back really to, what does pressure mean on the professional side? Like, as you're growing your business. I mean, it's one thing to go through it day to day. And you're right. You mentioned earlier about kind of not being so literal about this. And yes, these are first world problems, a lot of this stuff, what we're discussing. But obviously, in this context, we're just trying to talk about being optimal, if that's a goal of yours, or improvement, if that's a goal of yours. How do you slide that over into a business context, and maybe even a half step further into a real estate context? Where where are you advocating to put some pressure on yourself to grow your business? Are you maybe advocating that someone define what success means so that they can really meter the amount of pressure for themselves as to how far they should go and where they should strike balance?
Mhm. I love this. So let's take it into this a little bit of my real estate story, which has to do with pressure. So again, that post I wrote last night, I moved to Florida, just as a quick story, right? Moved to Florida, had $500 in my pocket. I had like $16,000 in credit card debt. I had, 20 something $1,000 in student loan debt. And I had a suspended license from a DUI that I got when I was 22 years old. Okay. Moved to Florida, knew one person. And there's some pressure, right? There's some pressure. There's another little side story to that I can't really say on here, that like I had even more pressure on me from some stupid things that I avoided, which goes back to like, gotta like face the dragons, like, and not avoid stuff, because it does start to pile up, and things piled up in my younger years there. And I remember my dad saying, and basically I was looking at, I'll share it, man. I was looking at some jail time from some substance that was in my pocket that the cop, when I got my second driving with a suspended license, and the cop found something on me, it was dumb. And, like that was pressure. I told all my friends that I was moving to Florida. We had a big like going away party for me and everything. And then the next day I got popped for this. And I was looking at big time like, you want to talk about pressure? Didn't have any money. Had to put more credit card debt on to get an attorney, which I got it all washed away. It was kind of a bullshit charge. But anyways, it was, hey, I just didn't pay attention. I would just kept going like, I'll be good. I'll be good. I'll be good. And it was like that garage that I never cleaned out, didn't take care of my suspended license, just kept driving without it, putting it off. And it like, I was facing these charges, right? Felony. And I remember my dad saying to me, I remember exactly where I was, Eddie. I remember the spot. And he goes, "You're at a crossroads, Alex." I was like 23. He goes, "You're at a crossroads in your life." He's like, "Which way are you going to go? You got to stop running from things and avoiding things. And like, which way are you going to go?" And that's kind of what we're talking about here. That Goggins had that moment where he was 270 pounds, uh, you know, eating 12 chocolate donuts, 2 chocolate shakes, spraying cockroaches at Steak and Shake for minimum wage. Like, there's a crossroad. I mean, he'd already gone pretty far, right? So anyways, kind of back to me. So I'm like, I'm going to go to Florida. I'm going to pursue my dream of travel and fortune and all this, right? So I went down to Florida with that $500 in my pocket, all this credit card debt, da da da. I walked the docks. I ate crap, man, and worked with migrant workers, sanding hulls of boats and all this. And so I had to work my way out of it, right? And I was just like, which way are you going to go, man? Are you going to go the road of like continuing to avoid stuff and that? So there was a lot of pressure, I think, on me in different ways, shapes, and forms, and I just decided to work my way through it
But what
and
was
not
the
avoid
guiding
it.
light there? What was the what was the real trigger? Were you just upset with yourself every single day, trudging through what was your life in the moment?
I think I think it was kind of like an epiphany of like, what are you? I went to college. I had a good upbringing. Was a captain of a wrestling team, National Honor Society. Like, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing? Like, I'm supposed to be an adult now. I mean, your brain isn't even developed until you're 25, but at least I had enough awareness of like, dude, what are you doing? And you know, I think there's something in that for everybody out there of like, what are you doing? Really? Like, why are you struggling so much in real estate? Why, like I mentioned here off camera, like I had this friend, right? Dear friend, roller coaster, makes some money, gets ahead, then kind of stops working. And then 3 months later, reaching out to people for loans. I've seen this happen for over a decade with this person. And it's like, what are you doing, man? Like, there's something you got to figure out in there. Unless you just identify with the struggle and you don't want to do anything about it. And frankly, I was talking to another friend about this friend, and it's like, we try to help. Like, man, you need some discipline in your life. You need to like listen to these people like myself and this other guy who have tried to help this person of like, man, like, what are you doing? That's the dad, right? Of like, what, you gonna just keep doing this? Like, do you like this? Really? You like this pressure that you keep putting on yourself financially? I think we have to have these like moments, and there's people that will come into our lives and be like, "What the f are you doing, man? Like, this is a pattern. Grow up.
And
Get some discipline."
how far do you go with that? I mean, how far as a friend do you go with that? And when do
I
you
think, yeah, that's a good
yeah,
question, man. I think,
when do you peel away? When do you feel like you've done your friend job sincerely, honestly, wholeheartedly, and then you say, you know what? Vaya con Dios.
well, that's a super good question, man, because it's tough. Like, you, I think you can only help people that are willing to help themselves. Because if they're not willing to help themselves, guess what you are? You're an enabler. And I think like, I still love this person. I still care about them. I still think of them. I'm not like, you're not my friend anymore. But it's like, I'm not doing you any favors by enabling you at all. And it's like, hey, if they're not willing to step up, then you can't help everybody. You can't save people that don't want to have a vested interest in saving themselves from themselves.
Yeah, I believe in that as well. I believe in giving it a really quietly sitting down and trying to not only help, but find the right angle for that particular person to help, you know, in a way that I think will land. And then I have to disconnect because I also don't want to carry that with me. I don't want to have to carry that with me and genuinely wish them well. Know that I did my best, honestly, to try to help them, and then be able to disconnect, because carrying it with you is, you're not serving yourself for sure, and you're not going to end being able to serve others as well. So that's a really difficult thing. But for me, that's been my solution for helping those with pressure.
I'll keep it going there on the real estate thing, again, it's like I had to help myself, like and I've put myself out there a lot in life, and I think that's kind of what Goggins is all about, like just continuing to move the goalpost for the pressure and the things that he can accomplish. So I I got a job on yachts and I did that whole thing and I got to see the world and I saved some money. I spent a lot in bars and on stupid stuff because I wasn't fiscally responsible. I did get rid of my credit card debt. That was good. But I got to a point, Eddie, where it was like I saw again kind of a crossroads in that. I was like, okay, are you going to continue down the yacht realm? And I looked ahead and I saw these captains and I saw this and I saw that path and I was like, oh, I don't want that path. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad. I saw real estate, glass ceiling for earning, and I was like, oh, like that's the path I want because I want some financial freedom. At the time, I didn't even know about like freedom from the mind and all that. I just wanted financial freedom. I wanted to be able to like, I was like, I got to see, and I'm going to continue to post about this, man, both on my YouTube page and on Facebook and that of like, I got to see, like, I love seeing the world and traveling. And so I got to see that on someone else's dime. But I got to see all these amazing places, Eddie. But I wasn't able to leave really the boat and go and like sit in a cafe and not worry about going back and scrubbing the decks or the next trip or whatever, right? So I got a taste, but I didn't really get to eat the meal. It's like I got a little nibble, and I'm like, man, I want the plate. I want the whole meal. I want it on my terms. So I decided to get into real estate. And this is where I didn't quite know what I was doing because I didn't have some really good mentors. This was back in the days. There weren't podcasts. There weren't CRMs. There weren't, pay-per-click leads. There was no Zillow. I've talked about this before. So I was in a tough spot because there wasn't even like really a path. It was like, well, sit and do floor duty and, call your sphere. I'm like, I moved up to Port St. Lucie up here in Stewart and that. Like, I didn't know anybody. Where am I going to call a sphere? I didn't have any podcasts of Ricky Carruth of Circle Prospecting. I didn't have any pay-per-click. I didn't have any Eddie or Alex out there going, hey, get a CRM. And I didn't have anything, man. So I had to figure it out. Well, guess what? I couldn't figure it out for about 3 months. Guess what happened? I rifled through all my savings and I had to go back to boats. And I had to do, about 3 months of scrubbing. I was down in an engine room in Barcelona, like sanding, mask on. I'm like, oh, I'm back, But I was like, it had that pressure of being back, of not being disciplined, of not saying that pressure that you had in that job that you could have woken up each day and gone and done. And I didn't do it. I was back sanding in the engine room, again, dollar per hour. And I was like, man, there was the pressure again of like, okay, you got to go back and figure this out because you can stay on the yachts. You can do this is the metaphor, right? You can just keep doing what you're doing. But if you don't like what you're doing, and it might be in your real estate business of you got either the roller coaster or you're like hitting a ceiling of I'm making 50,000 or making 80,000 or making 100,000. By the way, $100,000 is not a lot of money now. It was back, when you and I kind of started.
Yeah, that was like the goal.
That was the goal.
Yeah.
Yeah, the coaches, our great coach, Dennis Giannetti, he's like, he's coached hundreds of people. And it's like, they say, I want to make $100,000. Well, that's not what it was. That's not what, $100,000 was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So anyway, so I came back, man, and I just I got onto 411. I figured out 411.com. I would go and look in public records, and this was in Northport and Sarasota because I figured that out. So selling land over the phone, I would 411, cut, paste, look into 411, go back from public records, get their phone number, call them, say, hey, you got this lot over in Northport. And I learned how to list lots from people that, bought them through General Development Corps, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, and listed lots and, kind of figured out how to get good on the phone. And there was no scripts. There was no mentor. There was no system. So I kind of had to figure it out, which I think there's a lot to be said for that. We have so much now, dude, of people that can like guide us. But, it's almost like I think people need more pressure to figure stuff out on their own because there's just such a plethora of systems and masterminds and ways of doing it, you know?
You know, you used a word earlier that I think as we're talking is kind of bubbling up to the top more and more for me, and I think at least for me it's very accurate because pressure, as we've discussed, uh, comes in many forms. It can be lighter, it can be heavier, it could be life or death, it could be um, just getting through the day, whatever it might be, right? But I think the equilibrium or the middle spot in that word of pressure is discipline. Like sitting in the middle is discipline because you know that you have to deal with or add to your plate a certain amount of pressure, but you also should be able to act on it to accomplish it. So therein comes the discipline. So it's like I'm disciplined to accomplish this goal, or I'm becoming disciplined to accomplish this goal. And that requires me to be steadfast, steady, have a plan that requires some kind of pressure, a level of pressure, but the output at the other end of that discipline and that action is the goal that I have in mind. And so I think that sits, as I'm saying it out loud, it sits kind of in the middle. So then how do we as real estate agents bring on enough pressure for ourselves to meet the requirements of a disciplined action plan to get to the other side? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For me, um, you know, I always had a certain amount of discipline. It, I think it started with a work ethic when I was a kid. It was like dragging brush when I was 9 years old behind my dad with a chainsaw, with, getting whipped by stuff and bugs and heat. And like, that is a certain amount of discipline, right? That was kind of fostered. I kind of look back, I'm like, that's, I think, where it started. And then in high school, I think another level of discipline that I learned was I got into wrestling, and is like, there's no, like, you're gonna make weight or you're not gonna make weight. So sometimes I had to go a couple days without eating. I had to very much limit my water intake, and that was like personal discipline. Like, I had to do it for the team, but I had to do it for myself. Then there was another level of discipline when you are put in the cauldron of, you go out onto that mat in a singlet, like reduced to like just you and this other guy with just this like piece of spandex on, with your junk looking all like junk. And like, it's very much like there's no hiding, right? Like, you're either gonna win or you're gonna lose, and there's no relying on anybody else. So that was a big piece, like, of making weight, of, working my body, of getting my skills better. I didn't start wrestling when I was a kid. I started wrestling when I was a sophomore, man. And I always had a lot of grit because I was a little guy, and I had to, I always hung out with older guys and bigger people because everybody was bigger than me. But I had a lot of grit, and I just think that's a lot of what people maybe didn't get when they were younger, and kind of like your thing, wherever that is, wherever that came from, of putting things off. I don't know. Hey, man, you're Latin, so I think you guys come a little bit late to the party
That's
sometimes.
true.
So, so maybe we could joke about that, but it's true, right? Like, maybe that's part of where it comes from. I don't know. Maybe it's a cultural thing, but I always kind of had that, and I don't know. I think that might be a big thing that's lacking. That, and especially coming into this world that we're in now, man. Like, people got it real cushy. They got it real cushy, and they feel entitled to the cushiness because they've been marketed to, comfier life. Comfort is good, and it's like, is it? Is it really good for you? Because you're not refining. You're getting softer. And look, we want to be. I'm trying to learn actually how to be softer and feel more. And I used to be like F your feelings and all that stuff, and I'm digging more into my feelings and that, because that's a part of me that I want to refine, because it became too hard, Eddie. It became too stoic. So that's the balance, the temperance. The stoic. Courage, wisdom, justice, temperance, balance. And so I'm learning the softer. because I've always been really hard on myself, on others, and but it's served me. That discipline has definitely served me. Uh, so that's what I think
Well, if
about
we
it,
keep it in a real,
honestly.
if we keep it in a real estate context, discipline has certainly been lacking. And I don't, that's not just an opinion. When we know that more than half of the real estate agents who hold a real estate license in this country did not do one transaction this past year, one, they didn't take their business seriously. They were riding that cushiness that you just described. They were riding that this is easy, anyone can do it, right? And that is my mind goes immediately to, man, how can someone like that serve their customer at the highest level? My brain always goes to that. And the answer is you can't. You can't possibly. You're not proficient enough. You are not disciplined enough. You haven't done the reps enough, which is all part of discipline and doing. You haven't had the amount of conversations. You haven't solved enough of the problems. You haven't dealt with enough personalities in your customer base, in your customer journey. Talking to people and handling that relationship, because everyone is different. And my God, right now I know some people that are close to in my group. There's clients and customers out there, or prospects at least, that are engaging agents and asking them, "What is your political affiliation?" I mean, how polarizing, how upsetting, how sad is that? Like, why are you asking me that? And they're asking, well, how should I handle that question? And one of my answers to that particular conversation was, wish them well and shake their hand and say goodbye. I mean, that shouldn't be the starting point, the jumping point. So have discipline in terms of also whose clients you're going to serve and how you're going to handle those relationships. And back to my main point, though, is that there hasn't been enough of that discipline exercised and practiced for agents to become proficient. And we know that because they're not selling enough. And if you're not selling enough, it's because you're not taking your business seriously and you're not doing the reps, which means you do not have discipline, which means it's not a priority for you, which means it's not a do or die situation like it was with you and the way you've described, the way it was with me when I was starting a brand new family. And I decided because the honest answer was I got fired from my job at the time. I had already been licensed for about a year, but like most people, they kind of do it part-time-ish or starting to learn the ropes, or you work under a mentor in the beginning just to kind of understand what's what. So I had a full-time job, but I got fired up from that full-time job, and then I was like, now what am I going to do? So that's when I dove in, and I had no choice. It was my priority. I was disciplined because I had two little mouths at home that I needed to feed, and I could not disappoint. I could not fail as a father to them. And so that was my fire. That was my discipline. So in that moment, I read every single book and I went to every single training and I did the reps. And that's how I built my business, because I did the reps. I knocked on the doors. I shook hands. Hello, Mr. and Mrs. My name is. I see that you're trying to sell your house on your own. I mean, I knew this stuff backwards and forwards. Yes, it was FSBOs. FSBOs and expires. That was my way into success in real estate. But man, that was a forced discipline. I could be disciplined when I needed to be, but that was forced. That was external force that said, Eddie, this is do or die.
Yeah. I Pressure is a privilege. So it's kind of looking at it like, I think a lot of people can take those people out there. I wonder, man, I think it's well actually above the 50%. I think I think it's more like 70 something percent, but they must have either someone else bringing in the money. So they're like, hey, I got my real estate license because my friends sometimes sell property and, I can get a commission or something like that. I think that's one of the maybe categories of these people. And others, man, are some that are just in that struggle And I think that's an identity thing. I think some people identify with being helpless. I hate to say it, but I'm gonna. And that is a victim mindset. And a victim mindset, you're not going to be successful. I don't care, bro. And I'm going to say this, it might be a little controversial. You're not going to be successful in anything if you've got a victim mindset. You might be making the bills, you might be getting by, but if you're pointing the finger, if you're making excuses, the victim makes excuses, the hero finds solutions, the hero steps up. So do you want to be the victim in your book, as Joe Rogan would say? Like, if you were in the movie of your life, are you the victim or are you the hero? And I think that a lot of people don't even realize that they're the victim and they're bullshitting themselves. And that goes really deep. That's like probably some childhood stuff. That's why I believe in ayahuasca. That's why I believe in doing breath work. That's why I believe in personal development. Because like, what is really going on? What made you who you are? And who do you want to be? And what are you willing to do? Again, the discipline to become who you really want to be, to have the life that you want to have. And that's a Jim Rohn, like the degree of your success is going to be an equal proportion of the degree of your personal development. The victim does not want to personally develop, period. I've seen it over and over and over and over.
Yeah. So, and back to earlier about having the conversations, and trying to help. That is so difficult and frustrating. This is something I actually been thinking about more recently is, if you try to help, and people don't like to be told that they're doing something wrong. They just don't. It's very, very difficult. Like it's hard for them to admit that they're doing something wrong. And I've been trying to figure out why that is. Does it become easier when you get older? Does age have anything or nothing to do with it? Because if we could just be like, I'm open to listening to what you have to say, Alex, and I'm going to genuinely internalize it. I don't have a shield up. I'm not blocking every word you're saying because I don't want to hear it. I'm open to it. And I will honestly acknowledge where there's an opportunity for me to grow or improve based on what you're saying to me. I think that skill is not prevalent enough. Because
it's a character trait.
Okay.
It's a lack of humility. Like being humble is like, I don't know. I am not all knowing. I am not omniscient. The ego is what holds back. So the ego wants to be right. Consciously or unconsciously. Sometimes like, I want to be right. I want to be right. But like, what's going on back there? Like, to your point, like you're not open to like, hey, maybe I don't know what's going on here. Okay, that's being humble. Like, I don't know everything. And this person is my friend and they're trying to help me. And that's where I see like resistance. And I say this to these members of my team, whoever I'm talking to, and I get more and more idea of like, I just don't get into the conversations the minute I feel like somebody being resistant at all. I'm like, okay, like, why am I going to try to push molasses uphill here? Like, this is not, they're just giving me resistance. So why am I wasting my energy on someone who is so deep seated in the ego of like pushing back? It's like, bro, I'm simply trying to help you here. Like, I am not trying to control you. I am not trying to manipulate you. I care about you, and I'm trying to shine a light on something that I see going on here, and you're pushing back. Okay, cool, man.
I'm not trying to win. I'm not trying to beat you up.
I'm not trying to win.
Yeah, I'm not trying to win. I'm not trying to be right. It's not about me winning when I say my thing and I'm the right and you're wrong. It's not that. It's, to your point, trying to shine a light. I've had this experience. I've worked with people that have had similar, this was their outcome. This is what they changed. This is what they did. We have enough context now. I think that's where age comes into, because you just had enough context and you've had enough experiences and enough conversations where it's like, it's likely this. And I care about you, like you said, care about you. And I hope this helps you. And I think the key to that is sometimes I'll end that with, you may not be ready today, but I hope one day sooner than later, this will resonate with you. It will land the way, not only the way I intended, but clearly the way I believe will help you most if you apply it. And that day comes sooner than later so that you can live your very best life. That's my intention. It's always my intention.
You said something there that I think that's interesting. I think age can help because you've had experiences, and maybe you can look back and go, oh, I continued to, how we do one thing is how we do everything. Like I continue to procrastinate, or I continue to be in scarcity. I continue to not be able to pay my bills. I continue to not be able to invest, or whatever it is that you want, right? So you can maybe look back because that age is a great like perspective. However, without humility, and our personalities are developed and formed by the age, I mean, some say really young, but by right around like 30 or so, you have a like a very firm, because that's kind of like where adultness comes in. Like I'm 30, I've gone through my 20s, like either you're starting to have kids or whatever, and like you get this identity, and that gets really deep seated in us. And if we don't have the humility to be like, hey, yeah, I'm an adult and I got responsibilities, but maybe I'm not approaching this in the most effective way. And that's where, again, I'll keep saying, like, ayahuasca has helped me a lot, and breath work has helped me a lot, of like finding out what's going on, really looking at my life and going like, this is how I ruined these relationships. I was real dick. I talked about this before. Like I was a dick. I was dickish. I wasn't a total asshole, but I was definitely had dickish tendencies. And so I was able to look at that and be like, man, you were. It's okay. You're a good person, Alex. You didn't have like malicious intent, right? So you don't have to beat yourself up and be guilty about it, Alex, and have shame and all that. It's like you were. And what do you want to be? And how are you gonna, what are you gonna need to let go of, Alex? Being right, proving. Like I wanted to do it for me, for my daughter, for these relationships that I've now been able to develop with people like you, Eddie, where I couldn't have done. We wouldn't have done this 10 years ago. We wouldn't have done this probably 5 years ago, bro. You know? But because I came to a place of like being really curious about, man, I like this guy. He represents a lot of like what I have really interesting conversations with him. And it wasn't just going in there like, Eddie, this is where I think it should be. You should join EXP. Like, what are you doing this independent thing? It's like, oh man, like what's Eddie all about? And like, I want to learn stuff from him. And I, just became more open and receptive rather than trying to prove something to you. So age can be helpful, but if that ego is so entrenched of like, this is my identity, this is who I am, like usually unconsciously, you're still just that kid. You're still just that formative, personality that never really developed into what you could be, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. And as I'm listening to you, I'm resonating with it in the sense that you're right. I'm defining it as age, but I'm also seeing it as a phase in life which allows me more open mindedness, more clarity, more space to have these thoughts to myself, as opposed to the previous phase, which I'll call being a dad, and all of the pressures and attentions necessary, time spent, priorities in that dad space of raising a family and being a dad to two kids. I think that is where you maybe tend to stay in your lane a little bit more to get through the day, get through life, and make sure all those balls are not falling, that you're bad. And I think now, yes, it's age, but it's also because at this age, I'm juggling less balls and I'm emptying out those storage units. Right? that I'm not having to think about anymore. And so I think it allows me to have these more introspective thoughts and conversations like this with you.
Hmm. Cleaning out the closet. There's a lot to be said for it. There's the metaphorical side of literally cleaning out the storage unit, and then it's like cleaning out like the junk that our parents downloaded onto us
Yeah.
lovingly,
Yeah.
right? Like there's a lot of junk there. They were duped. They're like we deify them when we're younger, and then we put them on pedestals, and then we tear them down. They don't know what they're doing, and then like the Mark Twain. I when I was 18, I couldn't believe how dumb my father was, and when I came back, when I was 25, I couldn't believe how much he learned. It's like it's the same guy. He's just you're just hearing it because you have some experience to go like, wow, my dad's pretty wise. My dad, actually knew a lot more than what I gave him credit for because I had such a big ego as a kid. What were you talking about? Da, da, da. It's like, yeah, well, I didn't know. I wasn't humble. That's what it comes down to. Like, for me, it's like, I wasn't humble. I had this ego. And without that unchecked ego, which I think kind of circling back around to Goggins, he's created something else, man. I have massive admiration. And then I have also this like, man, I think he's still trying to prove something to that little kid in a way. But anyways, David, if you're out there, I love you, man. I'm not ripping on this at all. But I think the pressure that he had on himself from that body that he had created from not addressing those skeletons in the closet, not cleaning out those closets, and he just coping mechanisms come in, smoking, drinking. For him, it was chocolate donuts. It was, you know, shakes. It was, not working out. Like, so he created this body that was like, I think he was like 60 or 70 pounds overweight. Like that's literal pressure on your spine, on your heart. And then think about the mental pressure when you look at yourself in the mirror. You're like, man, like I'm carrying around freaking golden retriever on me right now. Like there's a lot of extra weight there. And that doesn't feel good. That doesn't feel good to look like that. So if people are carrying around weight, literal, or you're carrying around debt, which is another weight, it's just stuff that you haven't worked through, and that takes courage. It takes courage to say, like, I'm overweight. I'm broke. Why am I overweight? Why am I broke? Why do I keep burning through relationships? Like, that takes some courage to look at yourself and be like, I got to change something here if I want to feel differently. And so I really admire what David has done. He's a real man. That guy, like, gosh, he had a stutter, he had a learning disability, dyslexia, and like to be a SEAL, yeah, you got to be tough and be able to do push-ups and be underwater. And he couldn't swim. Like, he just got to become a SEAL. He didn't know how to swim. And there's massive IQ stuff that you have to go through. Like, these guys are smart. These guys are really, really smart. And so he had to educate himself. He had to build his body up. It is an amazing, incredible story. And so anybody out there is like, I can't do it. It's like, this guy was this overweight. This guy had a learning disability. He had dyslexia. He had a stutter. Like, he didn't know how to swim. So no matter where you are out there, that is an example of what discipline and focus can produce from someone who you would never think could become that. So whoever you are out there, if your next goal is to make this amount of money or have this body or have these relationships, hopefully this conversation that Eddie and I and our journeys resonate with you of like, dude, I didn't know anybody in Florida. I came down here, I walked docks, I ate shit, I worked with migrant workers, sanding hulls with a mask on and, smelling primer and just nastiness. I worked my way up. I did that thing. Then I was like, I burned that down and said, I'm going to get into real estate. Moved up here, knew one person. I didn't have any CRM. I didn't have, and I built this thing up to be like, oh, Alex, it's like, yeah, it was like a lot of work, a lot of discipline, a lot of ups and downs. I still have them. I still have them, man. So
I love that.
hopefully,
I,
hopefully this reaches the good.
yeah, no, I want to be able to, reframe that and make it a little more granular and tactical for those of our real estate friends that watch our podcast here. And what are you defining as the current pressures in our real estate market right now? Not both.
I think they're the same. I mean, I think they're the same pressures. I think that you can go like, okay, let's go back just 4 years.
I'm a real estate
What was
agent.
the
What are the challenges? Right.
Yeah, I'm just saying there's going to be these ebbs and flows of the markets. You have to be able to willing to pivot. You have to have like I was with one of the agents the other day and we were like, how do we refine you? How do we get you, this spot? And it was like, hey, he's doing the hard 75. He's, doing it, the tracker that I've been saying to everybody, like this tracker has helped me like track what you are doing. So I'm not trying to dodge your question. What I'm trying to say here is there's always going to be some kind of place where you can get better. So in the current real estate market that we're in is totally flipped from 4 years ago, right? 4 years ago, the pressure was multiple offers, above asking price, blah, 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 right? That was that pressure. There wasn't enough inventory. Now there's over inventory. There's higher interest rates. Before it was because higher interest rates mean that people can't leverage as much money. So you gotta, and there's more inventory and there's, I don't know what's going on in the world. The media is saying real estate's going to crash. Like before 4 years ago, they said real estate was the buy and you had to buy and it was multiple offers and it was the FOMO into that. Now it's the opposite. The pendulum has gone the other way. So there was still skills in that market that you needed to learn, which you talked about earlier of like building up your skills. So it's like, you got to come to a role play. You have to get like, how are you having conversations? Because if you can't see what you're missing in conversations, because we have the same pond that people get into, and there's people with good skills that get into it, create appointments and go out and get listings and buyers. And there's other people that get into that pond that don't come as much to role play, that don't come to our Wednesday call nights, that don't come with, I do right after here, Thursdays, I sit at that table and I make calls. And I had coaching from one of the agents of like, hey man, dude, what if you did it a little bit this way? And dude, I caught myself because this is awareness of like a little bit like, what the fuck are you telling me? And then I was like, no, let that go. He's got a good point. Like, or let's try that. Like humble. A newer agent can teach me something, but I have to be in that environment to learn and be humble that I can learn from anybody, right? So we could get into, like I mentioned it, high interest rates, high inventory, whatever political thing you want to get into because this guy's in, it was better with that guy, whatever. It's like all these bullshit things, but it's like you just need to learn how to have better conversations, period. You need to have better conversations, learn where your time is spent, and create discipline into making the calls with better skills, collating them, CRM, all the stuff that we have talked about. There's still the same stuff going on, a little different tweak of a conversation, but that's where you're developing and building your skills to have the discipline and the humility and the courage. Some people are like, oh, I don't want to go role play. I'm scared. It's like, you're scared to go into role play? Like, you got to go practice on people? Like, how's that going to work out?
Well, the reason this pressure right now is a privilege, back to our overarching theme, is because there are challenges in the market right now, and those challenges always lead to more agents leaving and not putting their foot on the gas pedal and taking advantage of the opportunity, because that's what this is. And that's kind of where I wanted to wind this up with is that's where the opportunity is. And so take this moment of pressure that may not necessarily be your pressure, but market pressures, dynamic pressures that are outside of you that you can tell are causing an effect on the market, in the real estate market, and knowing that it's going to weed out even more agents, and we've seen that because they're not doing any transactions. We talked about that earlier, and saying, this is my opportunity. I'm going to dive into this pressure. I'm going to then amass these skills by meeting with Alex or meeting with Eddie, and I'm going to absolutely take this opportunity and shine. This is the time. There are times where it's easier and all you need to do is breathe to do it, create a real estate transaction, but that is certainly behind us. And I don't see that popping back up anytime soon. So I would say that today moving forward, it is going to have to be the agent that is astute, that is practicing, that is creating relationships with leadership that helps them get better every single day, having the discipline, and becoming the Goggins of real estate. What do you say to that?
Man, put that in a clip. That Oh man, that's it. Like it's kind of like another one of my favorites here, Ryan Holiday, who I do my journaling. The obstacle is the way. So right now, the obstacle is the opportunity, which is what you're talking about. There's agents that are leaving because it's getting tough in a different way, right? It's getting tough in a different way. So you either look at that as the heroes, like that's the opportunity, because the victim goes like, oh, it's too hard and I don't, the interest rates are too high. Nobody wants to buy, za, 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 za. And it's like, that's not the truth. It's only the truth if you believe it's the truth. Because I can tell you from experience, from watching the people that have gone to role play, that have come to the phone jams, that go to the Thursday things, that come to the Friday meetings, that open up, that engage, that like they're winning. New agents. So I love what you said there, man. And it's like, this is the opportunity. It's like people are leaving. So, I had this one with one of the agents, the top agent on the team, is like, man, like build it now, man. Build it now, because when the pendulum comes the other way, like you're really going to kill it. I still think you can kill it here. I think you can make 200 grand this year. That's his next like thing. And I think he can do it. And I want to help him get there because he's so humble. He's so willing. He's so coachable, right? That and he looks at it. He said it the other day. He's like, man, this is awesome. Like these agents are leaving. Like, we had this thing come in. Something came out from the SEC or the FCC or something like that of like, dialers or whatever. We had people coming in and like, we can't use the dialer anymore. He's like, no, we can still use the dialer. And he's like, I love this because people are going to get scared and they're going to leave and they're going to use it as an excuse. And it's like, man, that is the way to look at it. That's the way to look at it. So I think bundling it all up, I 100% agree with you, Eddie. Like the pressure is a privilege. This different kind of pressure is like, if you can build yourself and look at it as a positive, you're going to win. If you want to do the other way, you're not.
I love that you said that it's difficult, and I think you use these words, difficult in a different way or harder in a different way. And I think in that is the magic, in that is the power, is not only identifying how it's different. It's like, is it because of interest rates? Is it because of lack of inventory? Is it because of, define what it is? It's a different kind of hard. But if you figure out what that hard is, you can define it and create the solution for that new normal, that new environment that we're in. That's your opportunity to be able to pivot that quickly and be the person who has the solution past the difficulties that define the current market, because they're always different. It's a different combination, it's a different level of events, of circumstances that create the market that we're in. Always. That's what's living and breathing about the real estate market. It's not the same. It's not, oh, now is the time of higher interest rates and this is the only, no. It's the interest rates combined with this, combined with this, combined with that. Let me create the talking points. Let me educate myself and create those ways through to a solution that serves the people I'm trying to serve. That's the opportunity. And for those that you've just kind of mentioned that are seeing it that way, those are the winners. Those are the winners. And to put it would work, not putting in the work to do that.
100%, man. And I want to punctuate that. And you double clicked on it, and I want to punctuate it. So what you said was, and this is the beauty of what you said here, is that there's always going to be another hard. It's going to be a different kind of hard. So if the common denominator here is hard, how do I deal with hard? How you deal with hard, how we do one thing is how we do everything, is you do hard shit. Cold plunge, breath work, ayahuasca is really hard to do. So that's why I continue. I started with the wrestling. I started with, getting whipped by bushes when I was a kid. My dad said, and I'm going to do another post on this, man. I really got some inspiration. Thank you from this here too. Of I got into I'm going into my storage unit, pulling out the shit. I had all these old photos, Eddie, like little guys. I know I actually have photos, you digital people out there, but I'm looking at these photos and I'm like, man, what a journey. So one of the journeys that I had, my dad gave me this advice. He said, before you go out into the world, this is like right after I got out of college. He said, you should go work on a fishing boat in Maine in the winter. That, I'm telling you, was friggin' hard. It was hard on my ego because I was like, and this guy, I was working for this one Greek guy, Johnny the Greek. And he's like, what your problem is? You're educated. Like, just smashing this kid who, I got a 4-year degree and I got a crusty old fisherman telling me that I'm educated. Just crushed my ego, right? Working in the cold, saw guys die, saw guys lose appendages. I literally saw this. Getting up at 4:30 in the morning, working a 14-hour day in a freaking, out on the ocean, brutal. Doing hard shit refines you for exactly what you're talking about here, Eddie. There's always going to be another hard. The market's going to do this. The market's going to do that. It's going to be hard here. It's never going to be easy. And it's the people that get into it thinking it's going to be easy because they haven't done hard shit, because they're not disciplined, and then they fail. So the point in what I'm trying to say here is do more hard stuff, right? Do more hard stuff. And then you refine yourself of okay, here's another hard. Here's another hard. But I'm refining myself to do hard shit. So it's another hard is just another hard. Let's do it. Let's go. Rather than it's too hard. I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna watch Netflix. And I'm not gonna go. I'm gonna eat donut food. And I like to eat carrots. It don't taste good. Sugar's better. It's how's it working out? Your health, your family, your finances. I guarantee that how you do one thing is how you do everything. So the people I love what you said there, Eddie, the people that I see growing, the people I see thriving in this business are the ones that have been in it for a while. I'd say I mad respect for some people that have been in it for a while that have just they just keep doing their thing. And then I see the newer agents, those are the ones that are thriving are the ones that put themselves into these uncomfortable positions, the ones that do the hard 75. They're the ones in the group, the ones that come in with the morning accountability that we have as a text thread. They're the ones coming in. They're the ones saying, what's your tracker, Alex? Let me do the tracker. Can you watch my tracker? Can you hold me accountable to my tracker? Accountability, coaches hold you accountable. Are you at practice? Did you do it? You're going to be on the first team if you did the practice and you did the work. You do great in practice, I'm going to put you in the game. They're the ones that get the good leads. Not the good leads. I hate to say that because they're all opportunities. But the ones that are call in from Google. I want to list my house. You get that opportunity because you did the hard work. I'm not going to give it to somebody who hasn't done the hard work because they're going to go mess it up anyways because they're in victim mindset. And you could give them the best lead in the world, ready, willing, and able, but your skills suck. You got a scarcity mindset. You're going to blow it. There's my stump speech. Thanks for listening to my TED Talk.
I love it, man. I love where you took that because it became very practical and became very real. And it became very actionable too. And that's hopefully what somebody will get out of this conversation, not only kind of an introspective view as to kind of where you are and where you fit and where there's room for improvement. And to an earlier point, are you open to that? Are you humble? Are you able to open yourself to those conversations, those learnings, those opportunities? Because man, I love our conversations, but pressure is a privilege.
Yeah.
Thanks,
It
brother.
was a good one today, Eddie. It was a
Yeah,
lot of
man,
fun, bud.
for sure. I know. I love it. I love
I
it because at the end,
appreciate you. Please.
I was going to say, because I love it because at the end, when we hit stop, you and I just reflect on the conversation, and we're always appreciative of what we do here together. And hopefully it helps one other person.
It refines us. We're getting better. We enjoy it. And I want to say I really appreciate you bringing out, I feel like, part of the best in me. So thank you.
That is one of the highest compliments I've ever received. So thank you from bottom of my heart. Thank you. That's very, very sweet. Thank you.
It's from the heart, man. Thank you.
We'll see you all in the next one.